It's Thursday, April 18th, 2019, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I'm your host, Chris Quinn, coming to you, as always, from Studio B of the Co-Prosperity Sphere here in beautiful Bridgeport, Chicago, the community of the future, I am told, quite often. Thanks for having us, Lumpin' Radio, once again, here in Studio B. There's a little bit of a fest going on in Studio A, but they seem like a pretty calm bunch, so I don't think that they're going to bleed over. Adi, you and I were just talking, we've dealt with worse, so we should be, I think they're going to behave, but I want to thank Lumpin for having us on yet again, and to the fearless leader of Lumpin' Radio, Mr. Logan Bay, for dealing with us yet again, so thank you. I also want to thank everyone who is listening over the airwaves on 105.5 FM, Lumpin' Radio. I also want to, if you are listening live, you can jump into the Lumpin' Radio chat room. It's tlk.io/WLPN, and give us a piece of your mind. Troll us if you wish. It's usually what you guys choose to do. You can do anything you want in there, and what you do is you choose to troll me. So, what do they say? It's the sincerest form of flattery is mockery. Isn't that what they okay?
Imitation.
Yeah. No, I think it was mockery.
No, I think it's imitation.
No, it's mockery. I'm pretty sure. It's mockery. But anyway, if you aren't listening live, you can listen to us via podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Probably iTunes. Let's be real. That's where most people get their podcasts. If that's the case, feel free to leave us a review or a kind remark or any remark at all. We always appreciate that. But what I appreciate most, honestly, is just word of mouth. I do think that's the best way to get the word out. So if you know someone who you think would like this show, assuming this isn't your first time and you already know what this show's about, let them know. If it is your first time, then what I like to do is tell you a little bit about what this show is. So basically, the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable is me trying to recreate some of my favorite things about craft beer, which is people who are passionate about craft beer and have made craft beer a part of their lives in one way or another, being it making it or selling it or marketing it or facilitating it or writing about it or drinking it or whatever, getting together and talking about this part of their life that they are very passionate about. I always really enjoyed it, and I try to recreate those moments with this show, the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. So, with that, I do have to note that everybody's opinions are their own. They don't reflect. Serge, what are you laughing at? Serge is the reason we were late, by the way. We're starting 8 minutes late, 100% because of Serge.
No.
Everyone here knows that. But if you, I've totally lost my train of, everyone's opinion is their own and not the opinion of any other entity they may or may not be affiliated with, be it Lumpin' Radio. Yeah, Lumpin' Radio or the Beer Temple or, Omega Yeast or their job or their company or a company that they pretend to be speaking for, anything like that. But with that, let's get to our guests. We introduce our guests in order of seniority, the only type of seniority that matters to me, how many times you've been on this show. So the most senior guest, I believe, is you, Melani.
Again?
Yeah, the Green Lady.
Hello, I thought it was Adi.
Yeah, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. What's new?
Oh, spring is here.
Mm-hmm.
Windows open in the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, getting ready for some big events.
Yeah.
Craft Beer Week is coming up as well. We're doing some launches and,
What are
stuff
you
like
What are you launching for Craft Beer Week?
Not for Craft Beer Week, next week.
Oh, right.
Next week we're launching the Rare Barrel out of San Francisco on Friday. We have another big event on Thursday. Some breweries that aren't available here in Chicago, and one meadery as well out of Tampa Bay.
I know.
Tampa, not Tampa Bay.
I know. I just found out about that because I asked them if they're bringing any beer, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's all spoken for already. It's like, oh, great. Thanks. Cool.
Did they say it was for the Green Lady?
No, that didn't really happen. I had asked, and then I found out shortly thereafter that you were putting on a bunch of beers, but it's all good. It's all good.
Couple two tree.
Yeah, a couple two tree. So that should be fun.
You can come on by and drink some after the show.
I'm sure I will.
Week.
I'm sure I will. Maybe I will. I'm not sure, but maybe I will.
Not positive. But,
I like that you're wearing. I'd say your version of a Deep V undershirt. Speaking of which, we have Mr. Deep V himself, Mr. Bryan Roth, our next most senior guest. How are you?
Doing good.
Yeah?
My favorite kind of introduction.
Yeah. I don't know. Can you see me? I only see the static picture of you in a Deep V.
Naturally.
Yeah. Can you see me?
I can see you just fine.
Oh, because
everyone can hear us.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see. I'm wearing the Villanova shirt, but I do have a Deep V underneath it. Just for you.
It's a movement.
It is. It's a move. It's slow moving movement, but you started it, so there you are. What's new with you, man?
Just living my best life. Had a good trip out to Boise recently, Boise, Idaho, which was a lot of fun.
Were you out there to look at hop farms, or?
No. It was actually the hop farms are very barren right now during the off season. But I was there just to attend and present at a conference, and had some free time just to kind of see the city and explore its food and drink scene. And it was much more exciting than I guess I had built it up in my head. Some really good food, and it's a really interesting beer city, kind of straddling this line between a lot of kind of traditional styles and then a few breweries doing much more progressive modern things as well.
Breweries that are native to Boise?
Yeah. So like Mad Swede Brewing, which is run by a husband and a wife. It's the very common story that we've all probably heard. An engineer who was a home brewer who decided to go pro in retirement, making a nice collection of just kind of, brew pub style beers, porter, English style IPA. And then they're on the other end of the spectrum, a place like Barbarian Brewing, which specializes in kettle sours and wild and sour beers. Doing hard seltzer and some hazy stuff too.
Were they really? They were doing hard seltzer.
Yeah. I was talking with a couple of breweries.
Can't get White Claw out there, I guess.
Well, even here in North Carolina, Fonta Flora, they do hard seltzer as well, flavored with same kind of thing, locally sourced ingredients.
Our seltzer's got local dirt in it. Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, I don't mean to be that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
His opinions are his own.
My opinions are my own. I love the Fonta Flora guys. They're awesome. But, yeah. I mean, I know I have heard that a lot of people who are drinking the hard seltzers, which are really on the rise, they're one of their biggest issues is it doesn't have enough indigenous ingredients in it, I think, is really what I've been hearing from no one ever. But anyway, okay, that's interesting. So I didn't know honestly that people were making that local places were making were seltzers. Were they good? Were people drinking them? I'm curious.
Yeah. And I at Barbarian specifically, I ended up having a conversation with a couple of people. One who purposely avoids as much gluten as possible, and one who is of the mindset of, like a lot of people, just trying to mind dietary options. And the reason they were there is because they went with a friend who wanted to drink the beer, and they wanted something else. And this is kind of like the repeated situation that I think a lot of brewery owners talk about now. Is it's an easy way to bring in more customers and make more people feel welcome.
Yep, reaching outside and kind of pulling in new people into the fold. Interesting. Well, very cool. Wow, out in Boise. And been watching any sports lately?
Baseball season, man.
Oh, okay.
So just keeping my stock of Sam Adams Summer Ale coming up soon, and baseball all the time.
Okay. All right. Just wasn't curious if you were. All right. Anyway, we'll let that go. My next guest, thanks, Bryan, for coming on.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And my next guest, Mr. Adi Hastings of Omega Yeast. How are you?
Oh, good.
What's up with you? I'll give you a much easier time than I did Bryan. It's too much fun to
thank you.
Give him a hard time.
No, it's been good. CBC wrapped up a couple of weeks ago, so now we've been getting a lot of new customers who had stopped by the booth or whatever.
That's awesome.
So it was a nice couple of days where no one was making any orders because everyone was busy, and now everyone's
calm before the storm.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, it's been going well. Found out that I might be pouring at some beer that I brewed at Kreiderfest in June. So yeah,
second shift.
That was really cool. Looking forward to that.
That's super cool. Did you make it at Omega or just?
It will be. Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. So yeah, I was saying I was also at CBC and I tried to find the Omega Lab booth. I try to stop by, as many of the people that I know as possible, and failed. Couldn't find you guys. I even had a map of generally where it was, and it is on a grid. But it's me, and I couldn't. I was just walking around. And I was like, "Where are these guys?" Oh well.
They kind of went all out for the booth this year, and had these.
You guys went all out 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, they had these. I didn't even know what was in them. We had these giant crates that each weighed about 3,000 pounds. Delivered
legitimately,
legit 3,000 pounds delivered to the lab back in January or February, and it was these are the booths for CBC and other stuff, and so I didn't know what was in them. We forklift them onto a truck, and they got delivered to Denver, and then I see a picture of them. I didn't go to Denver. See a picture of it. It's these giant slabs of wood, it's that's why it weighed so much,
right? Because it's giant pieces of hardwood.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a theme for I remember your booth a couple of years ago had a kind of a rustic, woody feel to it.
Apparently, every year they try and do something more.
Cool. Well, that's good. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
And my last guest is Mr. Paul Gatza, and Paul, thanks for coming on. Now, it is the tradition for first-time guests to introduce themselves, so if you could let everyone know who you are and what you do in the world of beer, that would be awesome.
Sure. I started in beer by homebrewing in 1990, and then by 1993 got a job at Boulder Beer here in Boulder, Colorado. Owned a couple of homebrew supply shops through most of the 1990s, and then moved over to the association in 1988, the Association of Brewers it was called at the time. And so after about 5 years of volunteering and contracting on various projects, I ended up selling my business and moving over there full time. Started as the director of the American Homebrewers Association, and then put on other roles of the judge manager for the Great American Beer Festival and World Beer Cup, and then the director of the professional division, what used to be called the Institute for Brewing Studies. And in 2005, the Association merged with the Brewers Association of America, and I focus solely on the professional division of that group. My current title is Senior Vice President of the Professional Division, and I supervise our work in the area of craft beer marketing, technical brewing education for our members, our membership division, government affairs. The key players in that. So I've got my hands in a lot of pies.
A lot of hats, yeah.
There in the beer world. Yep.
What I've heard from brewers talking about you is that you kind of, well, when you speak, they say, well, he's kind of our voice, is what I've heard people kind of say in so many ways. So I know you went up and did your speech, the state of the industry, state of beer. And it's you and Bart Watson, the chief economist for the BA, and he gives all the numbers. And then I think they wait for you to kind of, tell it to them as okay. What do I think about this? So
that's right. I'm the color commentator. I'm the Madden, and he's the Summerall for the group. So I try to do both. Give a picture of what's going on, as well as give some messages directly to the brewers about some of the issues I see going on in the beer world, some of the opportunities I see. So I try to give some color and make them feel connected to that larger community, that larger network of craft brewers.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to come on. Very much appreciated.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and it was cool. I was in CBC, and I saw you speak, and I figured, there was so much going on, and we were always talking about, like, where is craft beer headed, and I was like, well, let's just devote a show to this. So it's going to be mostly about this. There is some other topics. Specifically, it is a beer show, so I do want to talk about beers that we've had lately that we have enjoyed. So I figured we could start there. Mr. Hastings, anything you've had lately?
Yeah, actually. So I had the local Puerto Rican grocery store by my house, where I actually buy like 75% of my beer, because it's
from Junior.
It's El Yunque on the corner of California and Cortland. And I think single-handedly bought out most of their supply of juice pants. So
from Maplewood?
Yeah, from Maplewood. So, when that beer is, they get it in, and I just sort of buy it a 4-pack every day, and then it's gone. But I love that beer. It's nice. It's not too sweet. Beautiful sort of aroma. I dig it.
Very cool. How about you, Melanie? Anything
I've been drinking mead actually lately.
Really?
Yeah, kind of refreshing. It's with spring here.
Yeah.
We've got a couple really nice meads going.
Like
We've
what?
got one. We've got a Wild Blossom blueberry, which has a little tartness to it, which I dig the sour. So the nice tartness. Yes. And then Superstition, their cuvee is. Yeah, we were lucky enough to get a case of that, so I've been kind of hoarding that one.
Very cool.
But a beer I've been enjoying, actually, is the Illuminated Beer Royale, their Brut IPA with raspberries and blackcurrant. That one's another one that, it's been pretty good.
Nice. Brut IPA, a fruited Brut IPA. I don't think I've had one of those before, so.
Yeah.
Very cool. How about Bryan or Paul, anything you've had or anything you're looking forward to having lately or soon?
I have been demolishing 4-pack after 4-pack of Oxbow's Farmhouse Pale Ale.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's one store here in Durham that sells it, and I think I frequent that store almost exclusively just to buy that. It is just a wonderful, beautiful beer.
Couldn't agree more. I am in love with that beer. What an awesome beer. Both that and the barrel-aged version are just...
Both are amazing.
Yeah, and so different. They're just two entirely different beers. It's great. How about you, Paul? Anything you've been drinking lately you've been enjoyed?
Yeah, I at the conference, my friends from Boundary Bay Brewing Company up in Bellingham, Washington, gave me a couple cans of their Insubordination IPA, which was a collaboration project they did with the local roller derby club, the Roller Betties up there in Bellingham. And, it's pretty aggressive. It's, like roller derby, it's got it gets right in your face.
In what way? How is it aggressive?
The hop bitterness is definitely noticeable, but it's got a solid backbone. But, if you're familiar with Boundary Bay beers, they're very familiar with hops and like to put a lot of them in their beers. Let's see, at the conference, had a couple of the Revolution from your area, Everyday Heroes, the session IPA. That was being served at the First Timers open house, and, I wanted something that wasn't going to affect me too much, so that was a good one to have there. Also at the conference, I was trying to figure out what to say about the Resilience IPA, the Sierra Nevada fundraiser beer, since that was about the best example of networking and
Paul's dropping out a little bit.
Collaboration within the brewing community that I've ever seen in all my years. And the collaboration for the conference, the Brute Red IPA, that's the symposium beer. It doesn't hit the market; it was just served to attendees.
Awesome. I think we got all of that. It sounded very funny. You got really slow, and then you sped up real quick. I think we were having some internet issues, but I think we got it. Yeah, that Resilience, we've talked about that quite a bit on the show. That's pretty amazing. For my part, while we were out there in Denver, couldn't get away from the slow pour pills from Bierstadt, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Very good beer. Very European tasting, very, like a classic German. Reminded me a lot of kind of like a Stiegel Pils or something like that. Very good.
And it was traditional slow pour?
If you went to Bierstadt, it was. Yeah, it was there. And then I went to Falling Rock and had some Russian River Temptation on draft, which was outside of Russian River. First time I'd ever seen that, so that was pretty awesome. And it's really awesome when you see classics like an American Wild kind of legend. That was always kind of my personal favorite. And I have to admit, I was a little trepidatious when I ordered it, because I wanted to love it as much as I loved it in my mind so much. I didn't want to, kind of get let down, and it totally was just, it was amazing. It was so good. So there was that, and Red Poppy on draft, and it was pretty solid lineup. Our friends from Scratch were also on draft there
at Falling Rock.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, wasn't that so? That was really cool to see as well.
Yeah. Were they out there for CBC?
I don't think they made it out this year, but maybe there were some kegs out from GABF, or maybe who knows? Maybe they sent stuff out to Falling Rock every now and then. I know they do enough events in Denver just for the the festivals that they have out there that they do have a distribution agreement out there.
Nice.
So it was cool. I mean, that was a pretty impressive beer list out there. So yeah, I mean, those were kind of the two really cool beer experiences that I remember having. There was another place I went to that I really enjoyed as well when I was out there, but at this point I couldn't have enjoyed it too much because or maybe I enjoyed it too much. I enjoyed it too much. Anyway, I think it's about that time. Yep, we're at 8:30. So why don't we take about 60, 90 seconds, listen to some station promos. You guys can hear some of the other programming that's available on Lumpen Radio, and we'll come right back with more of the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. Welcome back to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I am your host, Chris Quinn, and I am joined by my guests, Paul Gatza, Bryan Roth, Adi Hastings, and Melani Domingues. And we were just talking about beers that we have been enjoying lately. We're listening to, during the break, it's getting a little more lively in Studio A. there's people gathered round, and apparently there's several mimes kind of doing their thing. Miming.
Something.
Yeah, miming it up over there. Always interesting happenings in Studio A. But I don't mind mime-ish things because they're quiet. Now, when there's a punk band in there, that's a little bit, I get it.
Yeah, like a couple of times ago, it was some hip-hop band or something playing.
Yeah,
it was.
And it can be a little...
the bass kind of made it through.
And, I like to bring it up, but the craziest of all of them was the Chicago Public Teachers Party that we had the one time, where at the break we went to the bathroom and there was I almost slipped on a pool of vomit. So,
awesome!
There you go.
Yay, teachers!
Yeah. Hey. Teach my child. It's a Thursday, so they were in school the next day. But I won't say which school it was. That's all I'll say. Anyway. We are. I figured we would talk about, just a small topic like the future rather of craft beer. We should be able to sum that up in the next,
2
hour and a half or so. Yeah, we should get that going. But I figure we've got a good group of people to kind of talk about that, and I have to say we've been talking about it quite a bit, and for me. I feel like a broken record, but I say it all the time. I feel the most unsure. I'm not saying unsure because I think it's going to be bad or good. I'm just being unsure as in I don't know where this is going to go in 5 or 10 years that I have been in recent history. So I'd love to get some opinions of where people think we're at and where we're headed, and I think was the title, is it the state of craft beer? Is that the name of the annual speech you guys give, Paul?
Yeah, I think we call it State of the Craft Brewing Industry.
Yeah.
So we try to address the future, and I think the future is looking like it's going to be a little bit of a continuation of what we're seeing right now in terms of trends that are not fully built out yet. One of those being the movement toward hyper-local, replacing local as a major purchasing decision, and the businesses people will tend to. We're seeing, at least in beverage alcohol, is a splintering of what people can drink. With line extensions, with new products, you're seeing alcoholic kombuchas right now. We talked a little bit about the seltzers before. These types of products are taxed as beer, but then they're different than beer. And the beer drinker is not, think about 40, 50 years ago, the beer drinker had one brand, and that's all they drank. Now the beer drinker drinks 40 different things.
Yeah.
Whether they be different brands, but they're also different categories.
Did you say that the seltzer is the same as beer?
Correct. Yep. A lot of the seltzers are flavored sugar beverages, which sort of related to flavored malt beverages, but they fall under the malt beverage area of the TTB tax code. If they're under a certain percentage of alcohol,
I heard it's like a
6.0.
It's ABV related, right? Mm-hmm. And as soon as it's over,
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when it's over 6%?
Then it would get taxed more likely as one of the other categories, like in the wine or spirits tax rates.
Okay.
And so there is an incentive for the producers of seltzers to stay under that ABV so they can pay the beer tax rate.
Yeah. Paul is
interesting.
He's slowing up and speeding down, or speeding up and slowing down. So, but I think we got it. I think we got what you were saying. And yeah, the hyper local, the the way I see it is, and I think it was Bart who said, we're at 4% growth. This isn't a blip. This is the new normal, and the new normal is still growth, but it's not the explosive growth. And it has arrived. Craft beer is now a thing, and
I don't think you'll ever see the explosive growth that we've seen previous. I mean, it's here, and people know what it is. And 10 years ago, they didn't. So the explosion happened, and now...
And there's so many ways we can go from here. Wow. I'm already, chomping at the bit. I mean, is it... I guess my question is why? Was this growth kind of stunted because the biggest growers were... some of the biggest growers were bought and kind of brought into the umbrella of larger beer, and it wasn't really available to, I think, naturally isn't an accurate way to put it, because there are market forces here going on, but what happened was the big guys, the biggest craft guys, or many of them, got money that was much larger than any other craft guy would be able to do, and they got the sponsorships and the placements, and they were kind of got these mega distribution power behind them. I mean, I'm sure that affected the growth. I mean, this is all behind us at this point, but I think that certainly had something to do with the slowing growth. I mean,
sure.
I think that's one piece. But I think there's some other pieces as well. One is that wine and spirits have not taken much pricing at all. And after the large brewery mergers in 2008, they were all about profitability and taking pricing where they could get it. And so they essentially, by pricing policies, they gave share away to wine and spirits. Also, spirits can be advertised now. Back in the 1990s, it couldn't be advertised. Yeah. So spirits are now an option for the newer legal drinking age adults. So I think that's a part of it. I also think now we're seeing health and wellness play into that.
Big time. Yep.
The health, and so people in their 20s are thinking more about not wanting to be hungover. They're thinking about what they're putting in their bodies and watching calories, and so I think that's a factor. And so all beer sales have been down over years. Craft has been growing slowly the last 3 after rapid growth earlier this decade. But one of the possibilities is that all beverage alcohol will decline. As the perception of health and wellness is that alcohol is not good for you. When, I'm a believer that alcohol in moderation can be a part of a balanced diet.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You sound like the. Now, is that going to be? Is that clip going to be played like people show like Captain Crunch as part of this nutritious breakfast? It's like the person who's
grain,
rock climbing. I love the couple who's rock climbing together, and then when they get to the top, they crack a Mick Ultra. And,
Yeah.
So it's interesting now. Let's just keep, going where this takes us. Everyone can kind of jump in. Where do you think this health and wellness thing leaves craft beer? Because it hasn't before now been about specifically being more healthy. It's been about having better ingredients, being more well-made, tasting better. It hasn't been about it being better for you physically, and where does that leave us? And before I'll just jump in and say right from the get-go, the fact that people like Fontafora, who are I think making some of the most interesting beers in the world, and was it not Madman, but something in Barbarian, maybe in Idaho, you were talking about, Bryan, just a moment ago, making seltzers as well. At what point are you a brewery, or are you just a beverage company? Not just a beverage company.
Well,
are you a beverage company? Not that one is worse than the other, but I'm just curious about that.
But are they making the seltzers for another option for people that are coming to their tap room? Because they're not having a full service bar. They're not having wine. They're not having ice to make cocktails. They don't have the mixers. So they're offering a quick offer to the people that want a cocktail, but they can't get a cocktail there. So you just pour the can, right? It's refrigerated, so you don't need the ice. Or is it something that they think is something healthy? I guess to me, it seems like they're offering something that they previously couldn't offer. So rather than have people go somewhere where they have the option of liquor, wine, and beer.
A bar or a restaurant.
Right. They're saying, okay, well, you're coming to our tap room, so we're going to offer you this. And all that the bartender has to do is open this can and pour it into a glass.
Or on draft or however.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it in cans.
Excellent.
So
yeah.
I think that maybe would be an incentive for them to make that rather than think of it it's a healthy thing.
There's the practical aspect, which is what I had mentioned with Barbarian. What you guys are talking about now absolutely is relevant in terms of trying to attract and like just bring new people in. But as it is with so many other things in a tap room, like the margins on that are killer.
Right.
I mean, I can't break it down for you aside from just general conversations I've had with brewers. But in terms of producing what it is and then selling it for an equivalent price of your
cocktail,
your core brand beer. So if you're selling, say, a pint of a hard seltzer you're making in house for, say, $6, the same price as one of your year-round beers, the margins that you're making on that alongside just what you're making on a normal beer you're pouring is fantastic. So not only are you serving the customer with what a customer might want or need, but there's obviously that other side of the coin for that business. Like that's a
which
great
that's always
revenue
come to play, particular with bars. The spirits margin is a lot greater than the beer margin, and bottled beer, canned beer, the margin is a little higher than your draft beer because you're not paying for your gas or your line cleaning or your all of that stuff that goes into it. And so on a bottle of liquor you are making more money than you do on a keg of beer. So your margin is greater on opening a can or pouring it off a draft if you're making it in house, right?
Mm-hmm. And so for go on, Paul.
One of the things I think about with the growth of seltzers and other products is capacity. Brewers across the country, if you take all the breweries and all the brewing capacity there, they're running about 55% capacity, which means there's room in the tanks, which means you're more efficient when you fill those tanks even more. And if you can fill them with something else that will sell, it makes your business more viable.
Yeah, I mean,
Lagunitas Brewery here in Chicago, they have 2 brew houses. One does not get used, except for like when they're doing kettle sours.
Really? I didn't know that they don't use that second.
Yeah, it just sits there.
It's like a 250-barrel brew house, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Just this like slumbering giant sitting there. Okay, interesting. And with the seltzers, it's also interesting that, I mean, even the raw ingredients are probably pretty darn cheap, right? Is it just corn syrup and water,
flavoring,
and then some flavorings, right? Interesting. And I, to your point, Melanie, I hadn't thought about it as we're using it as the non-beer because we can't pour spirits or anything like that, which it makes total sense that for someone who's doesn't want beer, they can still go to a brewery and get seltzers or get
now they also
else.
have wine in a can as well. So you can, especially I think with the tap rooms here in Chicago, when you can have guest taps and you can have guest you could probably have guest wine, I would imagine, right? So it gives people another option rather than
you can have guest here in Illinois. You can have guest wine. Yeah, I mean, I think it says cider, but cider's classified as a wine, so you could, I think,
and especially if it's in a can and it's packaged and it's delivered with your beer delivery. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that it's interesting, and I didn't even think of it until I was saying it, that is another option for cocktails.
Mm-hmm. Paul,
I think to build off of Paul's point too, I think that the idea of where capacity is sat, and that's been a challenge for a long time, where breweries have had 40-50% capacity, free capacity on their systems, opening up these other avenues of where they need to look in terms of revenue streams. So products like seltzer, obviously a big one. We're seeing a lot of breweries, big and small, Oscar Blues with their big Wild Basin line, down to if you're just making something for your tap room. Mm-hmm. Boulevard's doing canned cocktails now. There's a Highland Brewing here in North Carolina is launching technically it's a beer, but it's kind of like a much more carbonated, like Italian spritzer kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so all of these cases where identifying these new access to revenue streams from a pure business standpoint, but again, it gets back to the core of it. You're trying to serve your customer. Mm-hmm. And I think for a long time, rightfully so, the way that the growth happened within the beer industry, the idea of what craft brewers were doing, solely focusing on innovation and changing with beer, well, that's a lot different now as market forces have forced them.
So are we also then pushing?
I don't know if I see these as a bad thing so much as just an exciting time just to kind of see where that evolution has to happen, because these are businesses that are helping to support their local economies, and certainly people get excited about it. There's a lot that relates to just travel too, but some of these changes as they go, just to circle back to that capacity thing, just bring up this necessity of trying to identify new ways to think about what you're doing and how you're doing it, just to meet where the customer is.
Yeah, it's interesting. The issue, I guess, well, there's a few things. It's if growth of beer overall is down and growth of alcohol is potentially on its way down or something like that, are they new jobs, or are they better jobs, or are they just different jobs that they are giving to the economy would be one thing that I would be curious about. The second is, I don't know, to me, I can be a completely unrealistic bleeding heart with a lot of things. I want every brewery to be, Fontaflora and Scratch and stuff like that. But, I mean, we've got two folks here in the Peanut Gallery. Now, if someone like Oscar Blues or Boulevard starts doing canned cocktails or canned seltzers or something like that, does that affect your perception of them in any way? Like, just give me a show of hands. Like, it makes them feel better. It does nothing. It's kind of down, kind of up. Okay.
A key there too
no way. It doesn't affect you either way. Okay.
These breweries are very clearly separating those things from their normal identity too. So Wild Basin, which is Oscar Blues seltzer line, visually, aesthetically, is not making a direct connection to the parent company. And even in cases of some beers, you see their Stone separated Arrogant Bastard to have that kind of be a spin-off subsidiary of sorts. I'm using quotation marks around that. Mm-hmm. Firestone with the wild success of with the wild success of 805. Like that's presented still within the Firestone brand, but that is kind of presented onto its own thing.
Branded completely different. Yeah.
And I think you find that a lot with some of these extra product lines as well.
So then along those lines, what I started to say, and sorry for interrupting you, is it then pushing the boundaries of what is beer again? Is that what we're...
Or what is a brewery? Or what is a brewery?
I mean, and so is seltzer a beer? It's being sold as a beer. It's being sold and taxed as a beer.
Beverage companies.
But its ingredients are what? You said corn syrup, water?
Alcohol flavoring.
Cane sugar.
Yeah. Alcohol and flavoring, yeah.
So then is that still a beer? Are we calling that?
Not in my mind.
Yeah.
And what I think of as the trade understanding of beer, when people talk about beer, they're thinking about barley and hops and something that has color and a certain flavor. Although that has, those flavors have broadened in this country over the last 20 years.
Of course.
Yeah.
But I don't hear anybody saying a seltzer is a beer, except our federal regulations.
And to put some of that growth in context too, like Boston Beer is a really great case study for this, the way that company has had to evolve in recent years as Sam Adams, their volume has declined. Twisted Tea, flavored malt beverage has just been a rocket ship for a long time, and now they have truly hard seltzer. If you look at the first 3 months of 2019 versus the first 3 months of 2018, as a company, they're up in IRI volume about 15%.
Yep.
But the way that breaks down, the volume, almost 80% of the volume they've sold is just Twisted Tea and hard seltzer.
Wow.
Right.
So the way that's shifted and the way people are spending, I mean, part of that is seasonal because come spring and summer, that's when beer really hits its stride. But if we're talking about hard seltzer in the middle of winter is killing for Boston Beer alongside Twisted Tea, and this is not to say anything bad about that business perspective because they were doing right by their shareholders, but it paints the picture.
Right, because they're a public
things are going.
entity.
Well, and then you have things like Natter Days and stuff like that. The
the natty.
You see a lot of this with the macro beer companies as well. The Butteritas and
sure. And what I will say is those guys have been Boston Beer has been a great example of being very quick to market with a widely distributed option for something new. It was, Angry Orchard. It was Twisted Tea. They had a whole brewery, or whatever you want to say in quotes, brewery around Radler's when that looked like it might be something, and then they quickly, kind of got rid of it. It was like some mustache brand, Radler company, something. And then now they've got Truly. So it is interesting that they've gotten very good at kind of reading the tea leaves as to what is popular in the alcoholic beverage world and doing it. I'm curious, when's the last time their growth came from beer? And obviously to their shareholders, that's probably not the most important thing. And, maybe in the long run, it doesn't really matter either. But I personally don't want the Brewers Association to represent, not that I'm a member of it, but to represent a bunch of companies that are just chasing whatever alcoholic trend there is. And if it's, fitness seltzer today and then something else, I don't know. I'd rather see people kind of pushing beer as an option and kind of seeing what the market is and then maybe living within it and trying to create a rising tide for it and kind of carving out a space. And there are 7,000 breweries, and I'm sure most of them are not, are very much dedicated to beer. But
what you're describing right now, I think, is what the basis of the craft beer movement was, and that the building and the pushing and all of that. And I think that once it pushed through and then the big three started buying up all of those, it became more about, okay, how am I going to sustain myself?
Or how am I going to differentiate? Oh, well, I'm an independent.
Right.
I have an upside-down bottle on my door when you walk in or something like that.
And craft.
Right.
Owned. I'm
right, craft, but now craft mean...
What does craft mean anymore?
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say is now in people's minds, I think craft is really a flavor profile rather than a type of brewery. And in that sense, I don't think that's good for members of the BA. What do you think, Paul?
Well, that's also a success, though.
Right.
Yeah, Paul, please, go ahead.
We've focused on the companies, not the products, for a while. And I think about craft being more of sort of an entrepreneurial spirit, where the people involved are putting their asses on the line. They're what they, totally. Their mortgages are out there, and that's to me, that's more what craft is about. Originally, I think about the the whole Jack McAuliffe, buy the dairy tanks, get out the welder, and create your own equipment because you couldn't buy stuff like that. And as it's evolved, as companies started providing that, well, in the 90s, it was about all malt products. That's really what differentiated craft. And then we saw companies like New Glarus and Russian River starting to add some simple sugar into their beers because they were looking for certain flavor profiles.
And the BA kind of adjusted as a result, Their definition, rather,
Yeah, and so I think we still think of it as companies. I personally think of it as the companies. I do agree that there is one of the possible threats is that what beer is becomes less defined and people have less of an affinity. This is a beer drinking nation at its core. So I think there is some risk in the movement where brewers are chasing it. But on the other hand, I would also say that companies have to remake themselves every day. If you have the same brands, you become irrelevant in a few years. Think about some of the most popular brands and how people don't even drink them anymore because tastes have changed and people have moved on to other things. So, some of them choose to remake themselves within, barley, wheat, and hops, and others have felt like they've had to go elsewhere. I don't really see too many brewers drinking seltzers when they're out of the brew house and out on the town, but I think there's some risk there.
I've seen some. I've seen quite a few who have kind of gone from, PBR and hams and stuff like that to Truly or White Claw, honestly, is the one I see all over the place. But what I'll say to that is, I guess the second time I'm being prodded by producer Serge to mention that you're listening to WLPN LP Chicago 105.5 FM Lumpin' Radio. This is the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable, and as I was just about to say before I was interrupted by my producer, was that I also think that the people who are drinking either the the light lagers before or now the seltzers, or who are even into craft and now have left and are going into whatever it is, be it seltzer or wine and spirits and stuff like that. Were those people going to leave for something? Were they there because they really identified with craft beer, or there because they, it was the new thing and they were interested in it and they felt like they got a feel for it, and now they're on to the next thing? And my fear is that if these craft breweries are just constantly chasing, you're just going to be chasing forever and you're just going to lose your authenticity. I think Boston Beer is great at what they do, but when they have an all Radler brewery, it doesn't feel like it's authentic. It doesn't feel to me like anyone put their mortgage and their ass on the line, to borrow your phrase, Paul, to I'm quitting my job as an engineer because I have to make Radlers. Damn it! No, that's just not happening. So I think as you keep doing that, you lose to me what is the core, because it is about people putting their butts on the line, and I know in this room at least two people here who have done that for craft beer, not in owning a brewery standpoint, but it's not just about that, because you can do that with a ball bearing factory or whatever.
I feel like it begs the question, why did you get into it in the first place? So is it just because you want to make a lot of money and get out? And some people do, and that's fine too.
Sure.
Or are you in it for the long haul? Are you part of the community? Do you want to see things get better? So if your answer is A, that's fine too. If it's B, then I think that you always have to be evolving, though. You have to keep staying relevant. You can't just
100%
stop, no matter whether you're a brewery or you're making cider or you're making seltzer in a can. But I like to talk about what you're saying. Authenticity, people see it. People know when you're just not really in it for the right reasons.
So that's really important, because it cuts to the core of what building up the idea of craft beer was to begin with.
Right.
Pushing aside whatever a definition might be, ultimately, in a philosophical sense, we're talking about craft beer made itself the non-macro American light lager, right? So it was that kind of thing, which turned into a variety of styles, maybe defined in the U.S. by IPA, but ultimately talking about doing something different and presenting people other options. And so, there is that balance, because these businesses don't open to not make money and
just to close again. Yeah, exactly.
By literal definition, people are putting their lives at stake because they want to make money. So while it's there's the wonderful side of things where it certainly comes to building community and supporting people and being a part of something that you love in the industry. The business side of it, and how that is shaping, and the way that a lot of businesses and companies are thinking about the way that they can maximize who they're selling to and who they're talking to and who they can make fans of what they're doing. It's just a natural part of any industry, not just beer.
Sure, and I think when there was the quote unquote 0% failure rate, people in that sense there are brewers just here in Chicago, and I'm sure all over the country, who really, they were doing it as a business, but they were doing it as a passion that would allow them to survive doing what they love. And I think that is also what a lot of other people are doing. People are not looking to get rich. I mean, there are things that, I could have done something different if I wanted to make more money. I left a job making more money to do what I'm doing now. And did I want it to be successful? Yeah, I wanted it to be really, really, really successful. To me, successful wasn't being the Starbucks of beer, though. Starbucks. I'm not saying that as even necessarily a negative thing. I mean, I don't poo-poo the quality of Starbucks product, but it wasn't necessarily about that. I think nowadays it's getting to be more about that by necessity, because I think there was a very interesting graph that you guys had up on the state of craft beer speech. I got it wrong again, but whatever. Where you have barrel growth per brewery and numbers of brewery, and it looked like a big X as the number of breweries went up. The barrels of barrels per brewery growth was going down, and it's because if you're only growing 4%, but you're adding 1,000 breweries every 18 months, it's just going to. I mean, that's pretty obvious what's going to happen.
This is also because there's only so many breweries that are doing like 10,000 plus barrels a year, and a vast majority of all of these new breweries are operating on like 1, 2, 3, 5 barrel systems.
The long tail.
Yeah, I mean, they're like the smaller you get, the thinner your margins are, and but yeah, I mean, these people are. This is the explosion in the growth is these small. I mean, what he was talking about it with the sort of hyper local. I mean, these local sort of like nano breweries, like, that are opening up, and people
Boise, Idaho.
Yeah, exactly, and people are loving it. I mean, it's and someone that like has no plans for like canning, distribution, anything. They're
selling to Constellation for $1 billion.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
They're
taking a markdown. Yeah.
They've got a 3-barrel system and 5 fermenters.
But
and
I think that goes back to the beginning of it all.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because
they know everybody in their community.
Yeah.
Everybody in their community knows them, and they go there and they support them because they know exactly who they are and what they stand for, and what they're going to be making. And they don't need to go outside of their because that's what they wanted to do. They want to make good beer. They want to, So,
I think it goes back not just to it goes back to a very specific time in beer, which is the quote unquote microbrew phase of the 90s. It was like the brew pubs, when brew pubs were kind of the big place where you would get craft beer. because the distribution channels weren't there and the interest wasn't there. People were coming to you because of it. It does kind of harken back to that. But they're often tap rooms now and brew pubs.
Right.
But yeah,
and of course, like you're saying, people need to make a living.
Yeah.
But you're not gonna. I'm not gonna be a millionaire over it, but the hope is that I can sustain my business and still make a little bit of money and, send my child to college and whatever, and still be a part of the craft movement.
Yeah.
Right?
The problems that are now facing the businesses that help to set up where we are today, which is essentially volume loss.
Right.
The lessons learned from that are being directly applied by not just the new businesses that are opening right now, but those that are a few years old and had seen this wild success and now recognize the quote unquote, the sins of their parents. That when you see people Stone needs to take on private investment money to stay financially or culturally relevant, or Avery, after opening up a new brewery that has capacity for 150,000 barrels and they're not even halfway there, they find ways to raise money to pay off debt through selling to Mouse and Miguel and Founders, and then you have breweries that what we're talking about here. 3/4 of breweries in the U.S. are less than 1,000 barrels. Yeah. And so the recognition that aside from the margins, but that you can open up and exist in a space that you can be okay financially if it's a couple of you doing it and you have a few employees or whatnot. But looking at what had happened in the last 5, 6, 7 years, there's a lot to be learned that in real time is being applied to these smaller businesses that recognize the value, and a lot of it has to do with laws changing too, the value of tap rooms and what you can do there. The need that, you can bring in mobile canning has changed things for people where you can do can releases on site. There's a lot there that I think that unfortunately happened to stalwarts, New Belgium, Sierra, Boston Beer, that a lot of new upstart breweries and businesses are learning from that benefit them in the long run.
Yeah, there's a lot to unwrap there. We can get into that in the second half. I think for now we got to take a little bit of a break. We'll take 5 or 10 minute music break, and then we'll come back and continue this discussion on the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. Welcome back to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I like you got some smooth tunes going, DJ Surge. Dig it. You like the Adi's homebrew, Melani?
I do. The Vienna Lager.
Yeah. I'm your host, Chris Quinn. I am joined by my guests, Melani Domingues, Adi Hastings, Paul Gatza, and Bryan Roth, who, man, Bryan, you opened like 7 different cans full of worms right before we went. Man, it took all my energy to not just kind of dive into them. But
you ready to go fishing or what?
Yeah, let's go, man. Let's go. I think one of the things you said was kind of how this hyper local tap room has kind of become the spot of growth for craft beer, and it's interesting. I mean, the way I personally see it, and Paul, I definitely want you to weigh in on this as well, because to tell you the truth, there were some things you said at the state of beer. I'm not even going to try to say what it's called, but whatever, I'm talking about the speech, that I, kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit and got me a little defensive, and I had to kind of put on and look from both sides of things. As things get hyper-local, I get it. First of all, I see what I've kind of been saying, and I've been known to be a Debbie Downer. The little guy, the tap rooms are the sanctuaries now. That's where the growth is. It's not from the regional guys. It's not from the small guys becoming regional, becoming national, taking handles from big beer. Big beer, I think, has locked in a lot of those relationships. Regionals and nationals are really, really struggling. They're getting nipped from both ends. They're getting hit from the top, and they're getting death by 1,000 cuts, or 7,000, 6,000, 500 cuts from below, and they're in a really, really tough spot. And the tap rooms are eating their lunch, and also going eating the lunch of other craft beer places that are selling maybe presumably independent craft or not independent craft or whatever. So I think is it a zero sum growth is what I'm looking for now. I mean, craft was growing and it was taking from a part of the industry that we weren't really, we didn't really care if they lost some ground. If Bud, Miller, Coors wasn't selling as much, and even if their craft-y brands were losing ground, we were totally fine with that. In some sense, it was cool that people were drinking those beers because it would introduce them to the idea of these flavors. But now, it worries me when, Paul, you were calling out jealous tavern owners looking for scapegoats. I was texting people from at breweries being like, oh my gosh, someone talked me off the ledge. I'm sitting here, and Paul's talking to a room full or 2/3 of people who are brand new, either brewery in the works or 2-year-old breweries, highly impressionable, I would think, and calling out retailers as looking at them as faceless competitors. So that worried me. I'm not going to lie, and I am a bottle shop owner, and I am a tavern owner, and you know what? I am prone to jealousy. So maybe you're right about that too. But yeah, no, that does worry me. I am much more of a find reasons that to come together, to grow together. Tap rooms can definitely look at restaurants and taverns as a place that's stealing their lunch, and restaurants and taverns can look at a place like, well, you know what, we're just going to go to Truly and Spirits, and we make more money on shots anyway. So the Goose Rep's going to put in a new draft system for me. Screw it. I mean, and I feel like everyone loses then. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because I think the growth, it takes a lot of little tap rooms to replace a single Avery or a Smutty Nose or someone like that. So, or, even the bigger guys.
When was the last time you saw Smutty Nose on draft somewhere?
Right. I mean, not often. Yeah. Well, I mean, now, it's not really possible to really see them. But, but yeah,
also,
exactly.
Not certainly not to belittle that point or the value or the importance or the
Just
weight of what it is.
I belittle you all the time. Just do it.
When you talk about, so if you can get 20 local tap rooms making 500 barrels a year, of which in a lot of consumer spaces, that's where customers are going, but you lose, half of what Avery aspired to be. Is that bad because Avery couldn't have gotten to 150,000 barrels? Or is it good because all of a sudden consumers in a market that are clamoring for something hyper-local can get exactly what they want?
Well, what I'll say is, I would say both are good, but the hyper-local guy isn't going to be able to make the inroads in distribution and kind of set a foundation the same way that somebody like a larger brewery can.
So who's driving all of this? Is it the consumer or is it the brewery?
Driving all what?
Where we're going. Where like you're saying it's hyper local, or Avery can't make it, or
Yeah. They're having great. The beer drinkers having great. The beer drinkers having great experiences in tap rooms, and so I think it's coming from the beer drinker and the general public. There's a community feel. They're exciting, fun places to be.
And it's the source of creation too. You're going to where the stuff is being made. I mean, that is just cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to clarify that. Part of my advice to tap rooms was to make friends with the local tavern owners, restaurant owners, and do joint promotions, work together, send people over to certain places. And because if you don't make friends, then you do become an enemy. You do become an anonymous competitor. And I don't think that benefits the tap room owner at all. I think they have to be immersed in the community, and that means being friends with people that are trying to, sell beer as well. Another part of my comments was related to, in my position as senior vice president, I get to travel to a lot of industry events. And one of these events that I go to is the American Beverage Licensees, basically on and off premise people that sell beer, wine, spirits. And they are... that's where they're afraid of us. That's where I've noticed some of the jealousies and pointing of fingers. And one of the comments...
And what types of people are there? Can you describe the types of businesses that or is there a type, or is it just everyone there? Or does that make sense? Is it like usually, big guys? Or
yeah. No, it's usually small companies, independent companies that are usually one or more per state that are sort of the state reps for the tavern owners or the restaurant owners or the liquor store owners in that state. And but when the head of that organization last year in New Orleans was talking about how we are getting clobbered in the state houses. Those craft brewers there, asterisk T doesn't stink, and we're like the devil when we go to the state houses. That was a dose of reality given by the president of that organization to their members. Is it's time to find another way of doing things because craft brewers are very popular in the state houses.
And you know what? He's absolutely right. I think if a tavern owner goes there, there is a long, storied history behind that, going up to, through, and post-Prohibition. And with breweries, it is a success story in many ways. And I also think that they have become community hubs. They've almost become, the public house much more than taverns have because, they don't have a lot of the same stigma to them. And maybe because they don't have the spirits and they don't have the bar flies and stuff like that. So I think, and they have embraced their community and done a lot of things very, very well. And I also want to say, Danielle here from the Illinois Craft Brewers Guild won the Defense of the Industry Award. I'm sure I mangled that as well this year, and she's a lobbyist for the guild. Well, she's the director, but she does a lot of lobbying, and that is where a lot of the ground is being made. And you know what? That's what the brewers should be doing. That's what I tell Danielle. It's like, I don't agree with everything you're doing personally, or not even personally, but it's not in my personal interests, everything you're doing, but I think you're doing exactly what you should be, and it's up to the tavern owners or the bottle shop owners, whatever, to push back. And if we have a stigma surrounding us, then you know what, that's something we have to deal with. But that guy, whoever was in the State House, it's true. He is telling the truth that,
Is there a guild for taverns? Is there a guild for I'm assuming there's a restaurant guild.
There's a restaurant guild, but
at the
it's
state
different.
level.
Yeah.
Now, here's where the shoe was on the other foot. When it comes to wholesalers, a lot of brewers are deathly afraid of wholesale relationships, and I think part of that is related to the franchise laws that tie a brewer to their wholesaler in a territory forever. And what that has resulted, I think that has driven a lot of the movement toward the tap room, the popular business model, because if a brewer has a tap room and they don't have to get into distribution and they don't aspire to be huge, then they don't have to deal with that whole distribution world and, dealing with all the margins.
And within
they get
state,
and
you can self-distribute. So a lot of states you can,
or even outside of state, you can self-distribute it in another state.
Oh, it's over 30 states that allow self-distribution.
And you don't have to be in that state to do it.
And if you look at the way that there was celebration in Texas, which just recently reached this rather monumental occasion where breweries could finally sell beer to go out of their tap room. The last state in the union to do so, that was a lot of work and leading up to it, a lot of awkward interaction between wholesalers and the breweries themselves. And so there's clearly that appetite to be able to do that for all the reasons that Paul has mentioned here too. And I think it's a case where a lot of the way things have changed, creating those kind of difficult, well, maybe not difficult, but challenging relationships that you guys are talking about. I'd love to hear a little bit more from you guys in Chicago, because I know there was a case where it was Solemn Oath. They just did a collaboration beer specifically to address some of this, where it was a stout that it was called taproom exclusive, sold at places that weren't their taproom, Hopleaf and Bavarian Lodge, I think it was. In terms of the way that you guys saw or heard or conversed about it, I'd love to hear a little bit about what that perception was in Chicago.
For that beer in particular,
or just that action, really.
I think the action got a little bit of mention. I think it was perceived as a good marketing idea to kind of reach out with an olive branch and say, hey, this is something we want to start a discussion about. This might not be the right way to do it, or the best way to do it, rather. But it certainly showed, that people are kind of reaching across the aisle, which I don't even want to use that analogy.
Don't use that analogy, please.
Right. So, but yeah, and what I've said is, the breweries that are coming and saying, hey, I think this would be a great idea. We could have done it in-house, but we think it's better as an event with you guys. I think that goes a long way as well, because honestly, what I'm seeing is some of the larger breweries who are beyond the ability to make their living just out of their tap room, they need either self-distribution or the 3-tier system in some sense to survive. And they realize that, the retailers are feeling a little bit, I don't know, just they're not the cool kids in any sense. The cool kids are standing in line waiting for the can releases at the tap rooms. And if a brewery says, you know what, some of these super cool cans we're going to send to you as well, that means a lot. I know Revolution has been very particular in doing that, taking cans they specifically know they could sell out their front door. They are pulling some aside and sending it into distribution. And that fact is not lost because, it's about them then coming in with their pale ale and their this and their that and being like, you know what, these guys really do think about us. It's not just the stuff that they can't sell out their front door that what's left is sent to us. And there are other breweries who do that as well. So I guess getting back to what you were saying, Bryan, I think the idea was, I think it's a discussion that needs to be had. But did it have an impact that one time? I think it's just going to be like it's microtransactions is how it's going to happen. It's just going to be, just doing business. And I do think that on a day-to-day in the trenches level, I don't feel a lot of animosity because the guys who really don't care about retail don't deal with retail. They do it all out of their tap room. They do it all. That's how they do it.
And that's their business model.
Sure.
But when you're talking about breweries that for a number of years had permanent handles in the city and they're out in the suburbs, and now people don't have permanent handles really.
Great point.
And
they need a tap room.
They do. They absolutely do. And I think that the businesses that 20 years ago, you opened your doors and the people came because they didn't have tap rooms and they couldn't get the beer elsewhere and they couldn't get it at a bottle shop or on the secondary market. They came to you. Well, all of that has changed now. So you have to stay relevant within yourself. You have to be the competition to yourself. You're not in competition with the tap room, even if you 5 years ago had a relationship with those brewers. The relationship changed because they now have a tap room, but they're not competition necessarily. And I don't think that it behooves anybody to see it that way. It's a relationship that was built, and you're still in the same community, and the same people are going to those tap rooms that used to come to your business, but they're not coming to your business on a regular basis. So you have to figure out a way to get people.
Rotation Nation has become customers as well as just tap handles. It's not a regular coming to your place and just drinking whatever's rotating through. They are now traveling around as well. I mean, I see regulars. Literally, I was at the Mars tap room right before I was here, and I saw 2 regulars walk in to Mars, and I, bought them around and scolded them. No, no.
But
it's
those
just,
same people.
That's how it is.
That is how it is. And so if they can't make it to all of those tap rooms in one day, then they can go to this particular bar. They can go to that particular bar or that particular restaurant. And they can have it with their dinner. But to see it in as animosity or like, how dare you open a tap room, you brewer, when I used to have a permanent handle of yours. I don't think that is good for anybody. And so for Solemn Oath to say, look, I want to have you, Hopleaf and Bavarian Lodge, have this beer that would have only been released in our tap room is a great thing. It's kind of like an olive branch, for lack of a better. I'm not going to go across the aisle like you did. But, I think that we all have to stay relevant. So whatever that means for your business, because at the end of the day, I hate that expression too, sorry. But when you're looking at your bottom line, it's a business. So if you have to make a seltzer to get people in your door that normally wouldn't come in your door, as long as your integrity is intact, I think that you do what you have to do to keep your doors open and your lights on and the people coming in.
I think it's hard to argue with that, right?
Oh, good.
Yeah, but I will.
I know you will.
And now you'll listen. No. Yeah, absolutely. I also think that at some point, to me, it's hard. One thing I really do like about the Brewers Association is there's a few enough of them nationally to kind of corral around common goals. I think for tavern owners and craft brewery outlets, including breweries in general, it's much more difficult to kind of come up with strategies to do that. Because you know what?
But somebody else's success shouldn't take away from your
I'm not
success
saying that
or
at
happiness.
all.
No, I'm just saying, like, some people see it that way. They see, like, somebody being successful over here or doing this great event or doing something over here. Like, how am I going to get ahead of them? I don't think that's the right mindset.
But let me ask you, why don't you feature more wine, spirits, cocktails, ciders, and seltzers now? Why aren't you transitioning, trying to get in front of that at the Green Lady?
Well, so
why are you sticking with craft beer?
Well, I have 3 ciders on draft right now: Two Towns, DuPont, and Pilton. I have a 2-page list of ciders that we have. We have only high-end liquor. We've always only had high-end liquor. We've never had well liquor. and our wine is really good as well. As far as like the seltzer and the wine in the can, it's a packaging thing. We recycle everything. We reuse as much as we can, and if not, we recycle every can, every bottle. So rather than having 4 cans, I have 1 bottle that I'm recycling. So from that standpoint, it has more to do with environmental. What I started the bar for hasn't changed.
And what's that?
To be a public house. We're a tavern. So we're a public house, and we're part of the community, and we do a lot of fundraisers, and we do a lot of community things, and to support local and international as well, and to kind of, I don't want to say give breweries a shot that wouldn't have a shot elsewhere, but we started at the same time that a lot of the local breweries started. And so we all came up together, and just to have a public house where people can come and feel welcome and try different things and not feel like they are overwhelmed with the selection, but there's a good enough selection that every style is represented, and we represent the breweries that we like to support, that support us, that have supported us through the years. And that hasn't changed. But we still have to stay relevant. So rather than going forward and the whole rotation of the taps. So now when you come to the Green Lady, you will always find Duchess on tap. That's been a given. But you will find breweries. So there's a dedicated line to specific breweries. And you'll always find Transient on tap. You'll always find Microphone on tap. You'll always find Maplewood on tap. Twisted Hippo, Spiteful. There's 2 Spiteful on draft right now. There's Half Acre. There's Beguile, 18th Street, Pipeworks. All of these places that we all came up together, essentially.
No, you have Afterthought, too.
Afterthought? You saw that, too, right? Yeah. So, these breweries that's a perfect example of it. He's in 900 square feet making these fantastic beers.
Absolutely.
And that take a lot of time and a lot of patience to curate. And, these are things that I want to highlight, and I want to introduce people to these things. And that's what my business is about. And it is a business, and I still have to run it as a business. But, I want people to come in and be like, what afterthought do you have? Or, so, I don't know. I just feel like to feel like we're all in competition with each other is only helping big beer. And I think that you and I differ in our opinion on that. But not to say that I don't think that big beer is winning. Maybe that's where I'm saying we differ in our opinion. on that.
Right.
I think that what's happening here specifically in Chicago is a beautiful thing. There's so many breweries, and there's such good beer, and there's just a really good feeling with the community. So.
Wow, I think Melody just killed 2 out of 2. Come on. You got? What do you do Thursday nights? You got something you got to be doing?
We normally have trivia, so.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe you could do a podcast instead. I don't know. I could take over trivia for you. No, I think that was beautifully put, and I totally agree that we should all kind of try to be relevant and help each other and do all that stuff. Yeah. And I guess my fear is that some of this talk, I don't like the jealousies and that sort of stuff. And I guess I see it from both points. I think that it's not as easygoing as it used to be, and you actually have to try to find ways to work together. But if we do, it will be stronger for having done it. So
absolutely,
yeah. So that was the one thing, Paul, that I was like, why is he spending so much time talking about jealous tavern owners and faceless competitors and scapegoats? And I think I know where he's coming from, but I would have. Honestly, I wish you had just taken what Melani said and just played that over the speaker.
Yeah, she did it better than I did.
Thank you.
So you agree? Okay, good.
I didn't hear his speech, but I'm just saying thank you because that seemed like a compliment.
Well, I don't know where to go from there. All right. Well, I have a question. What do you think it says that some of the big guys Like Ballast Point is the one I'm thinking of in particular. Is seeing some rough times, closing one really big location, putting another expansion on hold, or two expansions on hold, or they close two locations and yeah. And I know Stone just sold their spot in Berlin. And that's where I'm
the Stone. I just gotta say,
the
Stone in Berlin. I've not been there, but I have a friend that went there. It's a really bad location. It's like there's no way to get there without taking an Uber from like the city. So it's beautiful, but they were not like getting the kind of traffic there.
Was it supposed to be a tap room, or is it supposed to be a production place?
It's a production place.
Well, there
it's
you
a tap
go.
room.
I mean, come
on. But
how many breweries like that in the States are just fine?
But then also their deal with BrewDog allows BrewDog is like continuing to produce the Stone brands there. So like, I don't know that this is necessarily like a huge loss for Stone. They're writing off some stuff, but it's like they still have like a presence in Europe, and for BrewDog it's amazing because it's like
for BrewDog it's great.
I mean, now you have especially with Brexit stuff, like you actually have a foothold in the EU, and
for them it's it's very good. But yeah, with some of the other guys, I mean, does that say anything in particular to you, Paul? Let's just talk about the Ballast Point thing. I mean, other than it just being, they sold for $1 billion and maybe they weren't worth it. Does it go beyond that in your mind?
It does. The way they didn't follow the large brewer acquires small brewer playbook there, in that there was no requirement of the founders to stay on.
Oh my
for a period
goodness!
of time.
And they stayed. They left after like 6 months or something.
Yeah, they were gone, and so they Constellation didn't know how to handle this company, this brand, the whole craft segment. So I think in that way, that was the key there that started this downward spiral, and then they went and started Cutwater Spirits and then sold that for a whole bunch of money.
I'm guessing AB though knew how to put that deal together. They won't be leaving.
Yeah.
They're locked in, I'm sure.
Yeah. Right. So I think that was part of the issue at the back before the purchase. I think Ballast Point had a unique place in the market with the flavor profiles. They were able to command a higher price for their beers. But now that other people tasted those beers, like, hey, that's pretty good. I think I'll make something like it. And so it's not unique in the market in any way anymore. It's differently. I also think about Ballast Point in terms of the distributor side. Constellation wanted to move the Ballast Point into their distributor network, what they call the Gold Network. And so a lot of the distributors had to pay pretty high multiples to get that brand into their houses. And it really hasn't worked, even though there was, high promotion there. So that's I think that's kind of interesting, is what that relationship between the distributors and Constellation is going to be, with Ballast Point continuing to be written down, and the sales decline is accelerating. So that's to me, that's going to be a fascinating thing to watch over the next couple of years.
Do you think it just gets lost in their portfolio? Why is it, if they've got such a stronghold from the distributorship side, why isn't Ballast Point doing better?
I don't think it's really getting lost in the distributor side. I just don't. I think it's a customer thing. I think the customers are like, been there, done that, and they've moved on.
I also think that that beer was very part of its allure was how kind of fresh it was. People were so excited to get fresh Sculpin, and they were willing to pay the increased price because it was better than anything you could get for $10 or $11. It was worth it.
Yeah.
We used to just crush through it, and I still think if there was that flavor profile available, there would be people. I don't know about if you could still get $16 a six-pack or whatever it was for it. But I think there is still a market for it. But what happens is, been there, done that, so they buy it less frequently, so the beer gets long in the tooth, so it doesn't taste as good, so they write it off. And that's what happens when you have, beer distributed into every 7-Eleven across the entire nation, and I would say, I don't know much about the Gold Network. Oh, man, I got to be really careful what I say. Some distributors don't understand that beer sales aren't the same as selling in spirits.
That's what I was saying, lost in the portfolio, because here in Chicago, it is with a very big spirit house. And they do have a craft division, but they have a pretty big portfolio on their craft division as well. And so it's sitting there, and nobody's ordering it. It's Walgreens and 7-Eleven, and so... Well,
there's also, spirits deals. They're doing spirits deals where there's, minimums where you have to... There'd be things where, I want 1 case of Sculpin. Well, you have to buy 3 cases of Sculpin or 5 total of this, plus... it was like dealing with a spirits house. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, well, I needed 2. Now I'm going to get 0.
Right.
So what else do you have? And it was I would tell the people, you guys are crazy. You guys are absolutely crazy. Good luck with your old beer, because I wanted to buy 2 cases or 3 cases from you, and now I'm buying 0.
And chances are, when those 2 cases came, I'm going to send them back because they're out of code.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Right. Yeah. No, it is a shame, and I see it happening with not just Ballast Point, but I see it happening with people who are going into the 3-tier network with distributors who maybe don't understand. And here's the other thing, and here's something that I find very worrisome, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, Paul, as well as some of the big houses, the blue and red houses, who were all in on craft when I think they were like, oh my gosh, this is the wave. In 20 years, it's all going to be about craft, not about, Bud and stuff like that. Now, they've been talked off the ledge a little bit. They realize that the big guys have kind of, I won't say won, but they've kind of, they've stopped the bleeding, and some of the biggest guys are now in their house, and their guys can now go into a bar in Wrigleyville or wherever, the Gaslight District or whatever, and say, oh, you like craft beer? We have craft beer. You like, what do you like, Golden Road? You like Goose IPA? Look how many medals it won back when we didn't own them. And then, and then they say, we'll sell your craft. And the my own little quip made me lose my thought. No. So now that they've been talked off the ledge, they are very much uninterested in craft. They've got they're only interested in the biggest players, maybe 2-3 brands, mm-hmm. and if there's anything else in their book, they don't seem as interested anymore. As of maybe 2 years ago now, it was mm-hmm. for a couple of them, it was a light switch went off where I would say, I'd like this, and this. Can you bring it in? And they'd be like, no. Wait, you carry this brand. They're making this beer. I'm essentially pre-ordering it. Nah, we don't want to add any more SKUs.
Nope.
Wait, what? What are you talking about?
It takes 2 weeks to add that SKU.
Yeah. But then, if there's whatever Rita, bang, that is on that. So it's just not, they just don't care anymore. And the first time that I'd said, here's a brewery you want, here is a brewery you carry, here's a brewery they're willing to distribute to you, a beer, a brand, because sometimes it'd be like, well, they're not distributing it. But now it's like, they will send you this. I've talked to the brewery. They will send you it. And the distributor says, nah.
It's not worth it for him.
That worries me.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a problem. I mean, the distributor's reality is that they're moving and selling fewer boxes on their trucks, and so they're worried about their volumes. If they can trade up on margin a little bit, that helps them. But if there a few years ago there was the vape program, the voluntary so-called voluntary program that if you had a certain percentage of, let's use Anheuser-Busch for the example.
Yeah.
If as a distributor, you would have a certain percentage of your sales would have to be Anheuser-Busch owned brands. And if so, then you would get a higher marketing compensation. Well, that was ruled to be not legal. And this gets back to that earlier point of, a lot of brewers now don't trust the distribution network. Even if they can get into a distribution house, their brands are often just being sat on. And they're dying in those territories.
Totally. And that, who knows I know people who signed on to a distributor, and then that distributor 6 months later, let's say it's a sour brewery or someone who does a lot of sour locally, they bring in another one from out of state who does sour. And they're like, what the heck are you doing, guys?
Yeah.
And it's, they're ruthless, and then you're tied into them, and you do have to be careful about that sort of stuff. But man, the idea of a brewery, and it's even happening now in the craft houses here, where there are long-standing relationships with breweries. They're selling a beer. I want that beer. And it is like pulling teeth to get that beer in. This is like, I'm talking about like a year-round beer. No. I want to buy I'll buy 4 or 5 kegs. I'm not going to buy a pallet, but yeah, maybe. And that's new. And that is like, new of the past couple of years. Anyway, we could go on and on forever, but we have run out of time. So there is time to go around one last time for any final words. Melanie, should I save you for last, Melanie?
Because
obviously,
I don't have any final words.
Nothing. You have nothing you want to say.
I think I've said enough.
Okay. All right. So you give up.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Grabs the microphone. Adjusts the levels just perfectly. Okay. Well, if you insist.
No, I think that my final word is that craft beer is continuing on the path that we are helping it to go on. So we just have to decide where we want it to go. That's my final word.
Cool. Adi?
I'm just going to say one of the side effects of all of this excess capacity has been many, 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 many breweries moving into making lagers, which I am totally fine with.
Me too. Paul, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, quick story. One of my best friends is a 77-year-old, old-timer, die-hard drinker of an original lager meant to be served at banquets. And just in the last 6 weeks, so he's like sworn it off, and he tried some Odell IPA. And he says that beer's great. He doesn't know what it's called. He just calls it the Blue Elephant beer because that's what's on the label. And that's all he's drinking now. It's really funny to see this change in someone who was just a dyed-in-the-wool large brewer supporter.
Wow, yes. 70-year-old, you said.
77.
77.
Wow.
77.
That's impressive. And I will say, Odell IPA, in my mind, is one of the best beers out there. That beer is exceptional.
They use Maris Otter for their base malts.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what it is.
That's the trick. Okay.
Yeah.
All you brewers out there making
Maris Otter.
Yeah, making hazies. It's all about that Maris Otter. Just remember that. You heard it here first. Bryan, anything from you?
We're only a couple of days out from 420. We didn't have to talk about marijuana's impact on the beer industry. So shout out to that. Something to talk about in the next show, I guess.
There you go. Yeah, that's true. It is almost 420. Sweet. I got a show I got to go to. I'm going with Dusty to the Tim Heidecker show. Guys,
they're having a fest in Uptown.
Yeah,
on Saturday. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you guys. It's been an awesome show. I want to thank my guests, Melani, Adi, Paul, and Bryan, and also to the Peanut Gallery as well for your input as to how seltzers affect your feelings. No, Serge does not get a shout out this time. He didn't deserve it. I would have if he deserved it, but he didn't. I have to be fair. He doesn't deserve a shout out. He didn't do that well.
I'm going to give a shout out to Serge.
Okay, fine. You can.
He got us going 8 minutes late.
That's true. Only 8 minutes. Basically a record. It's basically a record. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Again, if you enjoy this show, you can leave a review or just tell somebody that you liked the show. Have them go to, 15 minutes to the end and hear Melanie's soliloquy, and that should get them hooked. But I want to thank all my guests. We will see you next week for more of the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. So long.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again.